What's up, guys? Welcome back to the pod. If you're listening to this, then you may be listening to show number 2 for the day, depending on when you're getting around to listening to your podcast feed. I did end up recording a show, obviously, today, but it ended up going pretty long, around like an hour and a half, maybe close to that. And I know me personally, sometimes I need a break and I don't want to listen to one long show. If you guys are different and you do like shows that are longer, definitely let me know on Twitter at ASHMANNS or on the show's Twitter page at kickashpodcast_. But what I ended up doing was breaking up the show into 2 parts. I broke up the first part, which the bulk of that was with Paige. That ended up going a little bit longer than I originally thought I was going to. With her breaking news announcement there in regards to her departure that's upcoming from WWE. And then we covered a little bit on Cody Rhodes himself and his updates from his surgery. And then, of course, we got into a little bit of CM Punk surgery updates and then the AEW Dynamite review itself. So that's kind of where we broke up the show in and of itself. So this is going to be the beginning of part 2. Like I said, if you didn't hear part 1, you don't necessarily need to stop here and listen to the Paige and the Cody Rhodes portion of it, but you're more than welcome to. But regardless, I appreciate you guys, as always, for listening to the show, and here we go. The next update that we have is on CM Punk, and we don't have much of an update there at all. We know that it was successful, which is obviously good, but, and again, if you guys are looking for maybe a more polarizing AEW review, Dynamite review this week, or one that's not just, oh, I love AEW, you know, all that good shit, this is probably going to be it for you. I'm not going to sugarcoat shit. I'm not going to beat a dead horse or anything like that, or say shit just to say shit, but again, I'm not going to just overlook some shit that was kind of perplexing to me, like I mentioned at the beginning of the pod, so we'll definitely get into that. But one of the gripes that I had, and I guess I'll just kind of transition in and kind of mesh both injury update and the beginning of the Dynamite review here, was the lack of the recap for CM Punk's injury. If you didn't watch Rampage last week, the week prior, you wouldn't have known that CM Punk was injured. If you're one of those fans who, again, like I said, didn't watch Rampage and isn't on Twitter, and good for you if you're not, and I was one of them. Before I met this friend, like, maybe 3 years ago, maybe at this point, I wasn't on Twitter at all either. I had created a Twitter account back in, I think, like 2012, 2013, and before I had met this chick who was, like, really all about Twitter and, like, wanted me to, like, get back on Twitter and all this bullshit, I couldn't care less about Twitter and didn't spend any time of my day thinking about Twitter. And like I said, that was probably 4 years ago, maybe now at this point. Probably 2018, 2017, 2018. So yeah, and I would have been one of those people if it wasn't for her, thinking back on it. So again, hey, if you're listening to this, thank you. But it's not that far-fetched to think that some wrestling fans out there, or maybe even a good portion of wrestling fans out there, aren't on Twitter. So with my job, I'm not going to say where I work, but with my job, I interact with people all the time who don't like using smartphones, who have them just to have them because they need them for certain things. But other than that, they don't have apps on their phones. They don't like leaving their personal information. Now, I mean, there's certain extremes, to it, of course, but they just don't like the idea of technology and smartphones and shit like that. They don't like being so connected, and I respect everyone's decision for that, you know what I mean? Like, me, for instance, I have cut back a lot on social media as well, and especially within the past, I would say, 6 to 8 months, I, at one point, had deleted Instagram and Facebook from my phone, or at least from the home screen, and just wasn't using them. And I, again, just recently, maybe within the past month or so, had downloaded, or maybe a month and a half, closer to 2 months at this point, but I re-downloaded Instagram for this other thing, but again, I personally, I try to stay off of it for my own mental health, and for various reasons, but I just think the idea and the reliance on, oh, well, if your typical AEW fan is on Twitter every day and knows what's going on, they watch the YouTube shit, they know what happened to Punk, right? And I get that, and I'm not saying that it was a huge, and not even a mistake, but just a huge glaring miss, but like, in my opinion, And that's one of the things that I will say WWE does well. Like, if when there's a big moment or something big happening in WWE, or just anything at all sometimes, they recap it, you know, even if it's some bullshit with the 24/7 division. If it happened in the segment prior, and let's say we went to a commercial break, you get a recap of what just happened. And sometimes they do it to the death of us, and you feel like you just want to throw your eyeballs against the wall. But sometimes it's helpful, especially when you go from show to show, like from Raw to SmackDown or from Raw to Raw. So I think, and especially when it comes to your world champion and the fact that he's not going to be on TV for X amount of time, which we technically, again, we don't even know, because we don't even know essentially what's wrong with him. We just know that he's out, but he had a successful surgery, you know, and I just, that's just kind of ludicrous to me. And I love AEW. Obviously, if you listen to this show, you know that by now. I'm not someone who, I don't know. I'm not someone. I guess, like, I'm kind of in the middle. I'm not someone who's gonna sit here and just praise the ground that the company walks on or anything like that. But I will give them benefit of the doubt. I will give them time to play out a storyline and shit like that. Whereas WWE, we know the company. We know what we know 9 times out of 10 what they're doing, and we don't agree with the majority of the shit that they're doing, and they take us to be idiots for some shit. And, you know, there's just things, right, with WWE. So with AEW, I'm not going to, like I said again, be so hard on them, but I'm not going to just be so forget or so nonchalant and just overlook some shit when it doesn't make sense. So in this show, I feel like was one of those shows where I'm just like, what the fuck? Like, that doesn't make sense, or this explanation doesn't make sense. And we'll definitely get into that, because some of the explanations we got here tonight were just dumb as fuck, in my opinion. And again, no disrespect to any of the wrestlers in particular. Like, when I talk about this stuff, it's just the story itself and just the reasoning. And again, doesn't change the fact that I'm a big AEW fan, obviously, but it's constructive criticism, right? And for me personally, like, when I do shit, for instance, at work, that's dumb as fuck, or if I'm being extra or whatever, you know, I want someone to tell me so I can address it and take a look at it and be like, oh yeah, you're totally right. Or at least, if I don't necessarily agree with them, be like, well, let me take a look and see why they think I'm being extra. You know what I mean? And just acknowledge it and move the fuck on. But the whole not addressing the CM Punk injury and the whole reasoning as to why we're even having a battle royal to begin with to start the show. They didn't address CM Punk, and again, I could be wrong, but we definitely didn't get a video package recapping his promo from Rampage. We didn't, and his promo was great. Like, it was emotional, it was heavy, it was a big moment. It wasn't, like, originally planned. He had mentioned that he had just gotten into town, like, a couple hours prior. He wanted to be home with his dog and with AJ. So it was a big deal, right? And the fact that we didn't get a visual recap of that was just so strange to me. And especially when you're starting off the show with the battle royal to determine who is going to be in the main event, to determine who's going to be fighting to be the interim champion. Like, what are we doing, guys? So that was just kind of strange to me. And the fact that, obviously, like I said, we didn't get a video package, but we just got, oh, by the way, after the match itself was over, the battle royal was over, we finally got a reference from the commentary team that they mentioned JR and Excalibur announced that CM Punk had a successful surgery today, but that was it. Like, we don't, like, if you're not on Twitter, you have no idea what kind of surgery he had. We have no idea. So, for instance, like, let's just say that he had successful foot surgery. You don't have to go into specific detail, oh, he broke this, and this, you know? Just say if you don't want to be that specific, just say he has successful foot surgery. So then your average fan can be like, oh, okay, so he'll probably be out 6-9 weeks, you know? And again, like, we're humans. We know that shit happens. If you give us an example, and if you give us an idea that he has a foot injury, right? We're going to think, okay, 6-9 weeks max. If something goes wrong, or if he's out longer than 9 weeks, we're not going to be like, oh no, AEW told us he was only going to be out this, or he should have only been out this amount of time. Like, we're not going to not be fans because he wasn't back within that amount of time, right? Like, that's not how people are. Like, trust me, there's a lot of shitty human beings out there, but they're not gonna, if they're a wrestling fan, they get it at this point, and they're not gonna hold a wrestler to a certain time frame, right? We just want to know. We just want to have an idea of what's going on. Because if we don't have an idea, then we're going to make some shit up, and that's how things just go haywire. So, I don't know, that was just super, super perplexing to me. But that being said, the Battle Royal itself, I will give them credit for. I think it was a fun Battle Royal. I think especially Darby Allin had a lot of good moments in the match, and me personally, I think Swerve Strickland was the one who stood out the most, just with the story that was kind of started in the match itself, or kind of, I don't know if maybe started, but at least maybe addressed. The first one was the Keith Lee elimination, and it was kind of weird, though, that he eliminated Keith Lee so early on in the match. Like, if I was Swerve, like, I probably would have held on to Keith a little bit longer, just to clear out some more bodies in the ring, and then turned on him, you know what I mean? But, to each their own, whatever. So he turned on Keith Lee first, and they definitely played that up, and they had Keith Lee turn around and kind of be like, yo, what the fuck, dude? Like, why did you do that? Type thing. And then later on, it was essentially the same thing with Darby Allin. They had teamed up, and there's a lot of history between Swerve and Allin back before AEW was even a thing in their MLW days and on the indie scene. So they definitely played into that. But again, Swerve turned on Allin and eliminated him, and then right after he eliminated Allin, Swerve was quickly eliminated right after that as himself. So I forget who eliminated Swerve, but I kind of liked that story, and I kind of liked showing that other side of Swerve, and that Swerve, yeah, Swerve isn't necessarily a good guy or a bad guy. I feel like Swerve is just that dude. Swerve is just, he's too cool for school. Like, he knows he's the shit. Like, you like him because you like him, you know what I mean? Or you don't. And it's just kind of one of those things. But I just think he's just a really cool dude. And like I mentioned when they first signed him, I think it was a really good pickup. And I think if he's kind of one of those guys that kind of suffers with having such a stacked roster in a weird way, that he doesn't get enough time. But I love that the time that he gets, you really do feel it, and or at least it does something, right? And I think this is kind of the beginning of that going forward. But I don't know if that necessarily means that they're breaking up Keith Lee and Swerve, or if this was just a 1 week type thing, and Keith would be like, yeah, like, I get it, because, I mean, my goodness, we just had a shirt made, so we can't break them up already. They just had their shirt made. So we will move on, because it's kind of really hard to break down the Battle Royal match itself, but the victory did end up going to Kyle O'Reilly, which I was very surprised by. We did get a return to the ring of Andrade, who is apparently back from his honeymoon with Charlotte. Again, shout out to the happy newlywed couple. And Andrade is just looking jacked, dude. Like, he's just massive. Like, he's definitely bulked up, so shout out to him and whatever he's been doing nutrition-wise, but dude looks amazing. And then we also had an appearance from Wheeler Yuta, who apparently had just flown in from, I believe, Japan, like a few hours prior to Dynamite starting, so that's insane. So shout out to him. And he, again, you would have never, if the commentators didn't mention that he had just flown in, a few hours prior, you would have never guessed, because dude is just moves so quickly and just so smoothly in the ring. He's just amazing to watch. But like I mentioned, Kyle O'Reilly was the winner of the Casino Battle Royal and qualified for the main event later on that night to take on Jon Moxley to determine who will then go on to face what it did end up being, which we know now, Tanahashi at Forbidden Door. My second gripe of this show was the introduction of the All-Atlantic Championship, which represents AEW's international community. I get that. I like that. I like the idea that they want to specifically focus and spotlight their international community. Totally respect that. But we don't need another fucking title, guys. And I will be that person to say it. And I don't care if it's not really the popular opinion or what. And not only that, but the name of it being the All-Atlantic Championship doesn't make fucking sense, because we have countries who are being represented on the championship who are nowhere near the Atlantic. So it's like, if you're going to have, and I know technically the Intercontinental title didn't make sense. We had a European Championship. I get it, guys. I get it. And when I posted something on Twitter, like, that was one of the responses. And touche. I totally get that. That's a good point. But I didn't like those titles. And, I'm not going to say I didn't like the Intercontinental title, but I'm not going to say that shit made 100% sense either. But it was one of those prestigious titles that back in the day was was just held in a different realm, and it originally the origination of the Intercontinental title, like, this is not a history lesson here today, but it didn't start in WWE, and it wasn't just some title made up just and introduced on a random week. It had value to it, and it was defended in different countries. So like that was the whole idea and the whole basis and the whole genesis of this. Now, if that is the case with this title and it's only going to be defended in other countries, I don't know how we're going to do that, and I don't really know why. I don't get it, because one of my responses to, oh, well, it's to represent this market, and this market. Isn't that what the whole purpose of the World Championship is supposed to be? You're the world champion. We have one world. Just because you're in a different country, you're still on Earth. Your country is still on planet Earth. So if that being said, if you are the world champion, you are the champion of Earth, technically. So that encompasses all of the countries, that including the Atlantic. So I don't get it. Like, the Atlantic Ocean, like, I don't get it, guys. Like, it's so fucking perplexing to me. Like, I don't get it. When I saw that, I kind of laughed. Like, I was just like, what are we doing here? And the presentation of it, it was the most bizarre thing. Like, the camera was facing the commentators, and they were talking about the Battle Royal and all that shit, and then Tony Schiavone is like, and now we are presenting up next the All-Atlantic Championship. We have a special treat for you guys, and the title's just sitting there at the end of the table, and I will say it's a beautiful championship, don't get me wrong, fucking beautiful, the craftsmanship, mwah, superb, but it doesn't negate the fact that we don't need another title. Especially when your world championship, your heavyweight champion, is kind of in disarray right now. Like, and I'll get to that in a second, we have guys coming out here saying that they don't want to compete for the world championship, the number one title in your company. And I don't know. Like, I wasn't a fan of this, and we're still going to be getting trios titles down the road, which I'm, again, like, I can either take it or leave those titles, but it at least makes sense. We have a ton of trios, tag teams in AEW, a ton of factions, so that makes more sense. That being said, and maybe surprisingly enough, I will kind of put this on the shelf of, I'm going to wait and see how it plays out. But that being said, the All-Atlantic title, rather. I'm going to wait and see how it plays out and see if there is any specifications or special, I don't know, besides being from a different country. I'm gonna wait and see how this plays out and see how it's defended, and if it's just gonna be another regular title that's defended weekly or whatever randomly, and it has to be defended on the pay-per-views going forward, then I'll kind of rant some more at that point. But I'm gonna wait and see, even though I did just talk, but it sounds like a bunch of shit. Again, it's not shit. It's just constructive criticism, guys, in my mind. If you guys take it for something else, or if you have a different opinion, again, let me know on Twitter at ASHMANNS, or on the show's Twitter page at kickashpodcast_. But I'm not a fan of having another title. And it was so strange because Pac and Buddy Matthews, which is the match that we're going to get into here next, was already advertised going into the show, but then it just so happened that ended up being one of the beginning matchup for the tournament for the All-Atlantic title. So again, we already had technically a tournament made before the title, like before we even knew it was a tournament and that it was for this new championship. I don't know, guys. If I'm kind of getting too bent out of shape with this and just taking this a little bit too out of left field, let me know. But I personally, I guess obviously don't think I am. I just found it completely unnecessary and completely lackluster. And I say that because we have too many titles as it is. You know what I mean? Like, we have the ROH titles being represented on AEW TV. We obviously have our AEW titles being represented. Now we have New Japan titles being referenced. And like I said, some of our top wrestlers on AEW's roster wanting to fight for other world championships. It's just too much. It's just too much right now, and there's just too much going on. that being said, I'm going to stop ranting about that and move on here because we did get a fantastic match between Pac and Buddy Matthews that went a little bit over 10 minutes. Pac did end up picking up the victory here and apparently will be advancing it along in this tournament that we now know is the thing. He hit probably one of the prettiest black arrows to win the match that I've seen in quite some time. It's just insane what this guy can do. Pac is just something else. Like, he's a physical specimen. Like, looking at him, like, I don't think the dude has ate a carb in probably, like, 10 years, if ever. Like, it's just unreal. So, shout out to Pac, and again, Buddy Matthews. Like, I could watch them wrestle probably twice a week and still not get tired of it. But that match, like I said, it was won by Pac, and he does advance in the tournament. And again, that black arrow is just a thing of beauty. So if you don't want to see the whole match, at least just check out that black arrow, because I think it's probably one of the top 5 that he's ever hit. But after that match, we had a random segment where Trent Beretta wanted to talk in the ring, and I remember specifically seeing the graphic that said Trent Beretta speaks next. I remember thinking, like, why? Like, why is he talking? And again, no disrespect to him, but there's just so much going on. I just remember thinking, I literally thought, like, why? Like, what is he going to be talking about? And then I remember that Roppongi Vice faced off for the ROH tag team titles and all that shit. So it's just another one of those things where it's just too much going on. But that did lead to FTR making their way out. And again, FTR, I fucking love FTR. Big fans of them. And shout out to them because they were finally able to be accompanied to the ring by Bret Hart, I believe this past weekend. I think that was in Boston. I know I mentioned it here on the show previously, but I'm pretty certain there was the big time wrestling event in Boston, I think, or at least somewhere up there northeast wise. So shout out to FTR. I know that was probably a top 5 moment for them in their life, if not top 3. But they exchanged some words, which then led to the debut of Will Ospreay and his United Empire. I don't know if I'm gonna get canceled, so I'm kind of hesitant to say this, but when Will Ospreay first made his way on stage, with his haircut and just with watching WWE and all that bullshit, I remember thinking my first response or my first thought was, man, is this Jake Paul? And again, guys, don't come at me with pitchforks. It was just the hair. Like, I'm sorry. I obviously know who Will Ospreay is. Like, don't kill me, guys. But I don't know why that was my first thought. But he made the motion to kind of turn around, and his United Empire made their way out, blindsiding FTR and Trent Beretta in the ring and beating them down to set up assumingly their feud at Forbidden Door, which is just 2 weeks out from tonight officially. So it's kind of crazy to think that that's so close. I don't know, guys. I'm going to take a wait and see on this, but so far I'm just, I don't know. Something just feels not necessarily missing, but just off, and I just feel like there's just not enough focus. And maybe it's just me and my brain, like, I need focus, I need structure. But moving on, the next matchup that we got was Hangman Page versus David Finlay. Very good match here, pretty solid. Nothing too out of whack here. But the big thing that kind of I think was my main takeaway from this whole segment was the promo that Hangman said after the match. Guys, look, I'm not, between this one and the Wardlow one, I'm not here for it. The Battle Royal, again, going back to it, and I don't mean to sound so negative, but like I said, full transparency, if I'm gonna give shit to WWE, I'm gonna give shit to AEW when it's deserved, you know what I mean? And not shit in a bad way, but just constructive criticism and just things that just kind of stood out to me as a fan, because I love AEW and I love wrestling, right? We all do, or we wouldn't be sitting here talking about it, listening to it if we didn't, you know? We would be doing other shit with our lives. So me personally, and I'll just, I guess, speak for myself, I say this with love and coming from a good place. So that being said, I thought the Hangman explanation and the Wardlow explanation, for that matter, on why they were not in the Battle Royal was shit. And I think the fact that we had so many main absences from the Battle Royal, like your Chris Jericho, Bryan Danielson, just a lot of your top stars, just not in the Battle Royal itself. Like, why? And I say that, and I will give them credit for having Hangman and Wardlow specifically address it, them too. Because if this was WWE, they probably would not have even spoke about it and wouldn't even acknowledged it and just moved on, you know? So I will give them credit for that. But the explanations, like I said, were kind of bullshit. With Hangman just stating that there was a lot he wanted to say about the AEW Championship, but tonight wasn't the night because he wasn't in the Battle Royal and he's not getting a title shot anytime soon. And that he remembered that there is one more World Championship in wrestling, and then that's officially when he made his challenge for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship at Forbidden Door. Of course, that being Okada. Like, what? I'm sorry. Let me go from the beginning, right? So he starts off by saying that there was a lot he wanted to say about the AEW Championship, but tonight wasn't the night. Why? Tonight should be the night. Tonight is the exact night that it should be. You weren't on the show last week, which is fine, but this is the first time we are seeing and hearing from you since your loss at Double or Nothing. The championship that meant so much to you, and if you watched AEW leading up to Hangman's loss against CM Punk, you know the struggle and the battle and the journey that he took to even win the championship to begin with. And now the first pregnant, what the fuck am I saying? The first promo segment that we get from him after this devastating loss, or what should have been a devastating loss of his championship to CM Punk, he says that tonight isn't the night to talk about it and that he wasn't getting a title shot anytime soon. Like, why? And why aren't you upset about that, dude? Like, why? That's just, and maybe it's just me, but why? Like, I don't get why he wouldn't be speaking about that, and that wouldn't be his main focus point, you know what I mean? Like, so now your focus is the IWGP Championship, so technically if you win that title, you need to go to Japan, and you need to defend it, so you're just okay with leaving AEW? You're just okay with just winning this title in a different company, traveling across, apparently, the Atlantic, and defending the title and being the champion for a completely different company when just 3 weeks ago your heart and soul was being the AEW champion? Like, I just, too many disconnects there for me. Like, I appreciate him and AEW even acknowledging that and giving him at least a little bit of time on the mic here, but I was just not here for the explanation or lack thereof of him not being in the Battle Royal and not wanting to regain the championship, because he, out of everyone, would have been first in line to get a rematch, and technically he should have been in Jon Moxley's spot. He should have been facing the winner of the Battle Royal, for being technical, with him being the last champion. So I don't know, that just, and again, maybe I feel too strongly about this, but that was just too much of a disconnect to me. Yeah, so that being said, I'm just going to move on, because then that led to Adam Cole coming out, and he is wearing another title as well. He's walking around with the Owen Hart Tournament Championship, which, again, is just another title on TV. I don't know. But moving on here, we got a backstage segment with Thunder Rosa, and who pretty much had an open challenge to anyone. You didn't even have to be in the top 5, so you guys know how I feel about the ranking system, so again, don't even know what we're doing there. But that presented an opportunity for Marina Shafir to kind of confront Thunder Rosa, which set up the match later on for the championship, which was completely random to me, and it just felt like an excuse to say, oh yeah, here's a few moments or a few minutes for your women's champion. Here she's on TV, she has a backstage segment, we're done. You know, I was not a fan, or I'm not a fan of the presentation of Thunder Rosa and the lack of attention that she's gotten. I don't know. It just seems like she's kind of been an afterthought, and I'm not here for it. Again, no disrespect to anyone, and it's not her fault. I think I think she has the opportunity to be a great champion. She's just not getting the time, you know, and it's kind of perplexing to me because she's such a great worker. And she's good on the mic too. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like this is a big opportunity that's just not being fully taken advantage of. So, I don't know. There's that. But that led on to us back in the ring with Tony Schiavone in the ring waiting for Wardlow to make his entrance into the ring. And when I mentioned earlier that this was the other segment that didn't make sense to me, this shit did not make sense to me at all, guys. And if you guys thought I was negative with the whole Hangman Page part, like, forgive me in advance because. So we start the segment with, of course, like I mentioned, Tony Schiavone in the ring, and then Wardlow grabbed the mic from Tony Schiavone because everyone does, and welcomed everyone to Wardlow's world, which is fine, cool, whatever. He said that he then asked not to be part of the Battle Royal because CM Punk is their champion, and he said that if he's not tapping CM Punk out or pinning his shoulders to the mat, he didn't want the title yet. And then he turned his attention to the TNT Championship, one that he had an incredible amount of respect for, but has now fallen off of as of the last few champions. So I'm gonna stop right there because that is fucking absurd to me. That makes absolutely no sense. Okay, and again, no disrespect. I'm a big fan of Wardlow, all that good shit, but none of this shit made sense to me. I don't know if they talked about this in the back. Like, I don't know how anyone didn't say, like, yo, like, that doesn't really make sense, dude. So, okay, the whole idea of the interim champion, and again, guys, please let me know on Twitter if I am wrong. The whole idea with having an interim champion is that the interim champion is representing your company, that division, your roster as the top guy, the top man in the company, right? You are holding that ball and carrying that torch until your actual champion comes back, that being CM Punk. When CM Punk comes back, common sense tells you your interim champion will then face your actual champion, being CM Punk, to determine who the actual champion is going to be going forward. Again, that's what we did in the TNT title picture when Cody Rhodes was out for just a week, and we needed an interim champion for that 1 week. In other other companies as well. So, again, guys, I'm just, there's just so many things, like, I don't really know, like, what to say first, but that being said, let's say Wardlow was in the Battle Royal. Wardlow wins the Battle Royal. Wardlow defeats Jon Moxley. Wardlow goes on to Forbidden Door to then defeat Tanahashi. Wardlow is our interim champion. Wardlow is going to be our champion until CM Punk comes back. CM Punk comes back. Wardlow then has the automatic opportunity to make CM Punk tap out or to pin his shoulders to the mat specifically because he's our fucking champion. He's our interim champion. Like, I don't get that. That is the exact moment that you want. That gives you a shoe-in and a direct lane to do exactly what you stated that you just wanted to do. His thing was he didn't want to be in the Battle Royal because he wanted it when the time was right. He wanted to face CM Punk specifically for the title, or he didn't want it yet. Why the fuck wouldn't you want to be the interim champion so you get a layup to the championship to face Punk? Like, that's just, it makes no sense to me at all. Like, when he said that, I literally picked up my remote and rewound the segment to go back and listen to what he just said for a second time, because I was like, surely that's not what he stated, because that shit makes no sense at all. You should want to be the champion. What I was expecting him to come out and say was, since he technically wasn't an AEW employee or AEW wrestler, if you don't want to say that magic word, technically speaking, he wasn't an AEW wrestler because he was under a contract to someone else. If you don't want to mention Maxwell Jacob Freeman by name or MJF, you can just say, you can even simply just say, have Wardlow say, I wasn't officially signed to the AEW active roster, so all of my matches up until X date didn't count. Which technically would have been either the match at Double or Nothing or the match following right after, which was with JD Drake. Okay? So technically speaking, maybe the match with JD Drake would have been his first AEW match itself proper. So of course he wouldn't have been in line to face the champion, or to even, if we want to make up some other shit, to be eligible to be in the Battle Royal, right? Could have gone that route. But for him to say, if he's not tapping out CM Punk or pinning his shoulders to the mat, he doesn't want it yet. And then to turn his focus to the TNT title and state that it had an incredible amount of respect, but has now fallen off. So, okay, you don't want to be the interim champion, but now you want to go for a championship that has fallen off? Like, what? Like, and I get it, right? And I get the ideas I get the heroic idea behind that is you want to, and the babyface moment for it too, right? Like, you're stating that, Sammy Guevara was a shit champion because he's a heel now, and I guess Scorpio Sky is officially a heel champion as well. So that's what the babyface would naturally say. Totally get that, but the logic just doesn't make sense, dude. It just doesn't make sense. And again, you would think that I fucking hate AEW or some shit if this is your first time listening to this podcast. And I assure you I do not. They're probably my favorite company right now. If we're being honest. So it's nothing but love, but that segment was just kind of just fucking perplexing to me and just kind of bullshit. Like I don't understand the logic and the reasoning behind it or lack thereof. So that being said, we then went on to have Mark Sterling being shown backstage and saying that Wardlow could face him in the court of law or face 20 of the security professionals in a handicap match next week. Again, not sure why those 20 security professionals would want to go through a handicap match against a monster that looks like Wardlow when you can just get what would essentially be a for sure cash payout. But hey, maybe I'm too focused on the bag, right? But moving on, we had another segment where the Young Bucks were backstage, and conveniently enough, the Hardy Boys walked backstage, and they heard them talking about wanting to be the champions, and Jurassic Express wasn't too far by apparently, so they overheard. So that set up essentially a triple threat tag team ladder match for next week on Dynamite, which is going to be insane, but it was just kind of funny that both teams just so happened to be walking by at the exact time. And again, I just point that out because if this was WWE, I would give them shit for it too. It just kind of tickles me when we see shit like that. But next matchup, we had Thunder Rosa versus Marina Shafir for the AEW Women's Championship. Again, this was a okay match, nothing too great, I want to say, but it wasn't bad. It just kind of was what it was, and it was just there to set up the segment afterwards, which had Toni Storm come out to save Thunder Rosa, who is being attacked by Shafir, to set up what is probably going to be the feud going into All Out for Thunder Rosa going up against Toni Storm, which would be good, and I'm excited for that. Next up, we had the main event, which was Jon Moxley versus Kyle O'Reilly in the AEW Interim Title Eliminator qualifying match, which Wardlow did not want to fight for because it is beneath him. Sorry, Wardlow, just had to. The match itself was fucking great. I give it all this shit, just the logic and the lack of sense that it made going into it, or a lot of it, but the match itself was fucking great. And if you're watching AEW, you're always going to get a fucking solid match, and it's always going to be, well, most likely always going to be at least 3 stars plus, so you never have to wonder how the match is going to be. It was just a lot of shit on this episode just didn't make sense. But what did make sense, and what was pretty obvious going into the night itself, was that Jon Moxley defeated Kyle O'Reilly around 15 minutes to win the match itself. So, like I said, it is officially said that Jon Moxley will be facing Tanahashi at Forbidden Door to be crowned most likely the interim champion for AEW, which will then set up a match to face CM Punk whenever Punk is able to return. Again, we are not sure exactly if you're watching the show, what exactly CM Punk's injury is, but he did have a successful surgery on whatever happened, and he'll be back whenever. So there's that, guys. But next week, we do have a lineup here, or a breakdown of what's going to be happening on next week's AEW Dynamite. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, which is titled as Road Rager, which is pretty cool. I like when they do themed shows like that. But it is being held in St. Louis, Missouri, so a confirmation on that. Not that it's that big of a deal unless you're in Missouri, and if you are, then I hope you're going to the show, and I hope you have a splendid time. But again, we have the 20-on-1 class action handicap elimination match with the plaintiffs going up against Wardlow. The plaintiffs are those security guards, so God bless their souls. We have the All-Atlantic Championship qualifying tournament match, Ethan Page versus the returning Miro. Again, don't even get me started on that championship match itself, but there's that. Again, I will just say this match, Page versus Miro, is going to be fucking fantastic, so I look forward to that. The ladder match for the AEW World Tag Team Championship. Of course, your champions going into the match, and probably for the last time, is Jurassic Express defending against the Young Bucks versus the Hardys. My early prediction here is maybe, surprisingly enough, that the Hardy Boys pull out the victory here. Or maybe the Young Bucks. Now that I think about it, I don't know. I'm kind of torn. I definitely don't think Jurassic Express is going to pick up the victory here. I think what I would do probably is have Young Bucks pull out the victory here and get the W, and then well, I don't know, because you don't want to do another ladder match down the road, or maybe you do. I don't know. My opinion, I would probably have the Young Bucks pull out the victory here, and then have the Hardys on chase mode leading to All Out, and then you have another blow off match between the Young Bucks and the Hardys officially for the tag team titles, and then that's where the Hardys win the titles officially, and then kind of go from there. Ideally, in that match, though, in my mind, you would want that to be a ladder match, the Young Bucks versus the Hardys, with the Young Bucks defending the titles. So maybe you can run the ladder match back again, but I don't know. Then I just feel like it's kind of watering down that concept itself. So we'll kind of focus on that a little bit more maybe next week and the week later, or the weeks later, of course, going into All Out itself. But the other match that we have, and the only match that we had that was hyped for this show, going into it for a couple weeks now, was the hair versus hair match, which is the Wizard Chris Jericho against Ortiz. Be interesting to see who wins here. A lot of people are saying it's pretty obvious that it's going to be Jericho, or that Jericho's going to win. But I don't know. Like I think it may be time for a change for Jericho's hair, and part of me wouldn't be surprised if he takes the L here. So I'm going to be that person. I'm going to stand out on that limb here and predict that Ortiz gets the victory here. And I hope so, because Ortiz just has beautiful hair. Like, I hope he doesn't. I hope it's not him. But that is this week's extremely long show, guys. I'm probably going to break up the page portion of it into a separate portion, because, like I said, that went a little longer than originally anticipated. But thank you so much for listening, as always, and I hope you guys have an awesome week going forward.